Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I don't have to thank you, obviously, because you do this because you love to. This human life is so precious. Every moment is precious, but I can forget very easily and be caught up in what I think is very important. The day-to-day living, survival, even great projects become a matter of pressing business that distract me from remembering what a miracle I'm actually experiencing at every moment in life. Just the fact that it rained today is a great miracle. Whoever thinks about it, or that the sun rose and is crossing the sky and somehow or other we're being suspended in space on a planet that's perfectly equipped, as long as you don't wreck everything, with everything that you need for your sustenance and maintenance. And even when you do wreck stuff, somehow or other, if you give it enough time, it just grows back. Who thought of all that? And when you break a bone in your body, somehow it grows back 7 times stronger than it was before. If you cut your finger, it heals magically. On and on, every second there's a miracle taking place, but I miss it. So Krishna consciousness means to come back to that miraculous way of life, to understand actually that life is a gift. And in every moment I must have gratitude. I can live in gratitude. That I can appreciate every person, every living entity I see as a miracle. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the living soul in this world is the most amazing thing. The elements themselves are amazing. The universe is amazing, but the conscious living soul within the body is so amazing that he's hard to describe, hard to understand, hard to conceive of, what to speak of who Krishna is, who's the soul of all souls, and who's manifesting everything that we see before us, including all the other living entities. So Krishna consciousness is an extremely exhilarating way of life. It's another way of looking at things, other than the way in which one is filled with fear all the time due to missing the fact that Krishna is the supreme controller. I was just recently hearing about Narada Muni. That story in the Bhagavatam is thrilling, actually, about, there are many stories, one after another in the Bhagavatam, but the story of Narada Muni that comes in the first canto of the Bhagavatam tells how he was just a little boy, and as far as things went at that time, thousands of years ago, in the culture he was in, he was persona non grata, because he didn't even know who his father was, and at that time in history it really mattered who your father was and where you came from and so forth. His mother was a single-parent family. She was raising her child, and then the Chaturmasya came up, and some saints came to stay at their house. And during this Chaturmasya period means 4 months of the rainy season in India. And during that time, people would take a hiatus from traveling, because you can't travel anyway. At that time, there were no concrete roads and so forth. Very difficult to get around during the rainy season. So those 4 months are designated for extra study, staying in one place, performing intense bhakti yoga and so forth. So these sages came and stayed at the house of Narada, and during that time, the little boy, who was Narada Muni at the time, he wasn't Narada Muni yet, future Narada Muni, was listening to them singing and talking about the philosophy of ultimate consciousness and about the divine source of everything. And he served them, as did his mother. Once, by their permission, he took the remnants of their food, and they liked him. He was a submissive boy. He explains how he wasn't interested in frivolous sports. He was very interested in spiritual life and so forth. When you see a little child who's extremely interested in spiritual pursuits, it's such a rare thing, and it's attractive. So they gave him some special mercy. And after they left, then his mother died. And then the house burned down and he left. Because he had no one in the world and he had nowhere to go, but he wasn't afraid. He just went off on his own as a little boy. And as he was traveling through various terrains, seeing the mountains, seeing the swamps, going through little cities, so little villages and then some cities, he was noticing all the different workings of the energy of God. And especially he was noticing that although he didn't have anything, he was being maintained. That's a kind of a powerful realization, because throughout my life I think I need to be taking in all the time in order to survive. This is a world of survival. Constantly I'm thinking, if I don't have money, if I don't secure my own food, if I don't make a shelter for myself, I'll die. Our very existence is dependent on living off of others, actually. The Bhagavatam says that those who are more powerful, they feed off the others. Certainly true in the corporate world, right? At least I've heard that. Shraddha's emphatically shaking her head, yes. But there's this kind of idea in this world that if I don't fend for myself, I'm going to die. It's the nature of the material body, that it's such a precarious situation. In any case, he didn't die. He was being maintained. And anyone can experience this. In fact, one time when I was in New York as a brahmachari, Romapad Maharaj was our Sankirtan leader. And it was a time of the year, it was, I think, nearing the end of December, and the crowds were dying down at wherever I was distributing books. Said, go on traveling Sankirtan. Or maybe it was January. I just know it was cold. And I said, okay, great. Who am I going with? He said, you're going by yourself, because there's nobody else here. And I said, Maharaj, is that correct? He said, actually, you should remember that Krishna's in your heart. You're never alone. Prabhupada said that. And I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'll go with Krishna. And they gave me the keys to the van. I discovered halfway down the turnpike it didn't have any heat. Just cold air was coming in, so I turned that off. I was bundled up inside the car, freezing. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have much money at all. No credit card, nothing like that. And I just thought, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And for 2 weeks, just out on my own, one miraculous event after another, where I'd run into people, say, hey, you need a place to stay? And I met wonderful people. Everyone took care of me. Everyone gave me things. There was nothing to want. Also, I was interviewing Mahatma Das, one of the great devotees of ISKCON, a visionary, an innovator, still travels the world and gives talks. Wonderful devotee. He's one of the pioneers of the Sankirtan movement. In Vancouver, he was in Vancouver. Just at the time, the first big books landed on the shores of America. What was that first big book? It was Krishna book. It was a large hardback book with silver cover and a picture of Radha Krishna on the front. It came in 2 parts. It just came from Japan. It was printed at Dainippon printers in Japan. And devotees up to that point, 1971, had been accustomed to going out every day and chanting Hare Krishna on the street for 12 hours a day. Then they'd come home. And during that time, they would sell Back to Godhead magazine for 25 cents. And that's how they maintained the organization, practically exclusively. And they had learned how to get 25 cents for a magazine, but when the big Krishna book came out, everyone was thinking, no one's going to buy this. I mean, they had to get $8 for that. That was hundreds of times more than the 25 cents. And now Prabhupada was saying, distribute the Krishna book and so forth. And meanwhile, Prabhupada had been giving these darshans. He always gave darshans. That is, he'd have these times when people could come in and ask him questions. And his secretary, now remember, this is a time before internet. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Before WhatsApp and everything like that, where you're living in real time from every side of the world. we didn't know what was going on in different parts of the country or what to speak of the world until weeks later and so forth, months later. But in any case, this Prabhupada's secretary, Shyamasundar, 1967 Shyamasundar, who's still with us, and one of the most amazing people in the world that you'll ever meet. What a life he's had. He was one of the actual founders of the counterculture of America. And then he joined Prabhupada and he became one of the pioneers of the Krishna consciousness movement. Went with the first group of devotees with no money and no resources, no connections to England to meet the Beatles. Just got off the plane, lived in someone's garage, and they went and met the Beatles. And he became fast friends with George Harrison, which opened up a whole new chapter of the Krishna consciousness movement because George was interested, and that got a lot of other people interested. And he made a record that became popular, and the devotees became rock stars, actually. They traveled around and they sang Govinda Mari Purusham and other Hare Krishna chants in venues all over the world. They were being sent because they were famous because of George Harrison. All this happened because they had faith that if they just went out and tried, then anything would happen by the grace of Krishna. And Shyamasundar had been taking notes from Prabhupada's darshans, and he would send them out to the temples, and they were getting into what was called the BBT newsletter, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Every month would send out a newsletter. And in one of the notations from Prabhupada's lectures, his darshans, he had said, anyone who simply goes out to teach Krishna consciousness to others, who doesn't care for where they stay or for whether they have money or not or any support and just depends on Krishna, I take the dust of their feet and I put it on my head. And Mahatma said at that point, the devotees practically went mad when they read that. And in the middle of winter, they jumped in a van with a little bit of uncooked dal and rice, no money, no idea where they were going to get gas. And they drove off into the freezing cold Canadian countryside with a van full of Krishna books and Back to Godhead magazines. And at that time, they didn't even know how they would sell a Krishna book, just BTGs. And they drove to a little town in the middle of Canada, and they landed there, and a blizzard started. So they didn't know what to do, so they got out and they started chanting on the sidewalk like they did everywhere else in the world. There was no one on the street. And then one person showed up, and he was drunk. And he didn't even know it was a blizzard. And one of the members of the party, named Haridas Thakur, who had sold a Krishna book in San Francisco, knew that it was possible. And he approached the town drunk with a big shiny Krishna book, and he showed it to them, went through all the pictures and everything, and all the devotees were thinking, this is insane. But then suddenly the man started going through all his pockets for about 5 minutes because he was not so accurate with his approach. And he finally pulled out $8 and he gave it for the Krishna book. And the devotees saw a miracle in front of their eyes. That there, where there was no people, in the middle of a blizzard, somebody showed up and he ended up buying a Krishna book. And they were all cheering and happy, and then they realized, we're stranded in the middle of nowhere. We have no place to stay. We'd freeze to death in the van. So they started driving around this little town, and they saw a sign for a hostel. They went up and knocked on the door, and the man opened the door, and he said, yes, you can stay here. And it had a private bathroom. It was the perfect brahmachari ashram. And Mahatma Das said, we were thinking, yes, this depending on Krishna stuff really works. And it does, actually. Narada Muni, traveling across, just as a little child, was being supported. He could see everywhere he went. He was just depending on Krishna. He had no other choice. And at every moment, the Vedas say, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vididhati Kaman. Krishna is the supreme benefactor of everyone and is taking care of every living entity at every moment. Right now, we're breathing. I don't even think or appreciate the fact that I'm breathing. But if you take a nice deep breath and realize that it's a gift, every breath that we have is a gift. The fact that we can look out and see each other is a miracle, and it's a gift. It's a story of a woman I read who had gone blind in her youth. And then there was an operation by which she could get her sight back. And she recalled that after she had recovered from the surgery and she could see again, she was washing dishes, something she hated to do before. And she was looking at the soap suds back before dishwashers. And she was appreciating that there was a rainbow in each one of the bubbles that was on there. And she saw the universe in a whole new way, in a whole new light. So those who are Krishna conscious, at every moment, they're aware of the fact that the breath that they take, the vision that they have, the fact that one can think and direct one's thoughts in a certain way and make free choice. Have free choice. This is all a gift from Krishna. This deep appreciation for all these gifts is Krishna consciousness. And in the Bhakti scriptures, which are also a gift, it's specifically given by those who already have the understanding that what is necessary for happiness in this world is to have a connection with Krishna. And that only because of losing this connection does one become unhappy in this world. And therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described how Srila Vyasadeva, out of this deep sense of compassion for all the human beings, all living entities actually, but especially human beings who have the capacity to look at the written word and then change their lives because of it, wrote down the Srimad Bhagavatam and the rest of the Vedas for that matter, but especially Srimad Bhagavatam. And he made that as a gift to the whole human society so that everyone could take advantage. And simply by reading and understanding the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam, which are ample for anyone who reads the Bhagavatam and sees step by step what are the teachings of the Bhagavatam and the descriptions there of the spiritual world, one can turn one's attention towards the spiritual world and actually regulate one's life in such a way that one becomes completely happy. And what is the life of such a person who feels satisfied? The life of such a person is a life of giving. Because normally in material consciousness, I'm thinking, I need to sustain my life, otherwise I'll die. But those who feel fully supported by Krishna at every moment are thinking, how can I give to others? How can I give back? And even before one has that full realization that Krishna is maintaining me, and that at every moment I'm living in grace, if one begins the activity of giving, then one will gradually come to that realization. Because in this world, when we become charitable, not for the purpose of getting something back, but just out of a feeling of doing the right thing, giving something to someone else, we grow. It's undeniable. Actually, last year there was a survey amongst college students all across the country asking them a simple series of questions. Two of the questions, is it better to give or is it better to receive? And all of them said, better to give. Isn't that well known? Isn't that well known anyway, even if you haven't realized that that's what you're supposed to say? It's better to give than to receive. But there's a reason for that. I mean, why would it not be logical if it was actually the case to say, no, it's better to receive than to give? Because there's an inherent sense in everyone that by giving, you actually become a bigger person. You actually become greater than you are now. And we can see throughout history how those who have been unrestrained givers, who give their lives to others, become famous. Even within a short period of time. There are the stories of Runti Dev, who was a great king, who's just now glorified by sages throughout the world, that he had been fasting for many days for a special spiritual sacrifice, and then he was given a nice meal with ghee, and he was just about to eat. Someone came in who was starving, said, "Please, can you help?" And he gave him half. He was just about to eat again. Someone else came in. There's a whole series of needy people who came in. He just finally gave away everything. And Runty Dave is famous throughout the universe. His name is brought up as somebody who is willing to sacrifice his own portion, his own satisfaction for others. He became famous. And then there's the story of the demigods going to Dadichi, also known as Dadancha, because they needed a slight bit of charity from him. They were informed that the way they could defeat Vritrasura, who was this formidable enemy of the demigods, was they needed to make a weapon. And the only way they could get it was from the bones of Dadancha. So they were told that you have to go to him and ask him for some charity. What should we ask him for? What kind of charity? You say, just ask him for his body. Nowadays, there's a way in which people can leave their organs to donation after they die. You can have it put on your driver's license. Some people do it, and other people, nah, I'm not going to do that. But that's after you die. But even sometimes people think, I'm not going to do it even after I die. But Dadichi or Dadancha, they were asking while he was alive, said, we need some charity. We need your bones. What do you think about that? And they were told that you should ask him, and at first he will deny your request because he'll want to hear you talk about self-realization and the difference between the body and the spirit, because he likes to hear that so much. But ultimately he'll donate. Talk about a donation. So they went and asked him, and finally he said, yeah, sure, I'll give you my bones, because he said, one way or the other, I'm going to have to give up my body anyway. It's going to be taken from me. It's not even my body anyway, but it'll be taken from me, so why not give it now for a good cause, rather than have it thrown to the dogs or the vultures or so forth. Bali Maharaj said a similar thing when giving away his entire kingdom. He was warned by Shukracharya that if you give a donation to Vamandev, he's asking for a small donation, three paces of land, and he was a dwarf. So you might think, well, that's no big deal. In fact, at first, Bali Maharaj told Vamandev, who came to him for charity, that why don't you ask for something big? He goes, I'm the emperor. I can give you anything you want. This doesn't make any sense, little brahmachari. You should ask for a big donation, not small donation. And Vamandev said, if I'm not satisfied with 3 paces of land, then I won't be satisfied with 3 islands. 3 planets, that meant. You can give me 3 planets, and where does it end? Where does it end? So Shukracharya was his so-called spiritual master. He was the family guru. He didn't care about spiritual advancement. He just wanted to make sure the money stayed within the family because he was getting dakshina. So he was saying, don't give. That's Vishnu in disguise. And if you give to him, then you're going to lose everything. And Bali Maharaj, first of all, I already promised. And second of all, if it really is Vishnu, I should give to him. Because he had this inclination I should give, even if there's danger, even if there's this idea that I might lose something. I might lose everything. And he was warned, you will. But he did it anyway. And who's more famous than Bali Maharaj? Vamandev, of course, for those of you who don't know the story, he's Vishnu himself. So for this first step, he covered the whole world. Second step, he covered the 3 worlds by expanding his leg all the way to the top of the universe, through which he punched a hole in the universe and let through the water from the causal ocean, which descended as the Ganges. And then he said, give me my 3rd step. You said 3, I took 2, there was nothing left. So Bali Maharaj said, please put your foot on my head. I give you my body, I give you my soul. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur ultimately says in his song, Manasa Deho Geho Yo Kichumor. He said, I give you everything, Krishna. He's praying to God, and he's saying, I give you my body, my mind. I give you myself. Even myself, I don't even belong to myself anymore. I just give it to you. Actually, this is the greatest relief, because everything is being maintained by Krishna, and everything belongs to Krishna anyway. And it only makes sense to give it back to him and say, please, you take it. Then what do you have to be concerned about after that? What concern could you possibly have in this world when you're fully surrendered to Krishna? And then you also see that I'm being maintained more than I was before. When I was trying on my own, things were very difficult. Things are very difficult to maintain in this world, isn't it? Or is it just me? I could tell you the difference in my life from when I was a brahmachari in Augusta, because I remember the day that I got my first apartment, and it was $800. It was on Charnock Street, right next to the temple in Los Angeles. Never had an apartment. I'd never had a phone. Back then, there was no cell phones. There's regular phones. And all these other kinds of things. And I went in, they said $800. $800 to like sit in a place with the four walls and lock the door? And then everyone started telling me, that's just the beginning. You got to have insurance, because someone's going to come and take all your stuff, or the lady's bathtub upstairs is going to leak and it'll all get wrecked, which it did. And what to speak of phone, and then you have a car to get back and forth from one place to the next, and it all adds up, one thing after another, and the next thing you know, you're running scared from one place to the next, trying to make up for all this. And then you forget how hard you're working throughout life. You can go from one decade to the next in complete anxiety. And someone comes along and says, why don't you just surrender it all to Krishna? And he's like, why would I do that? Me give up? Prabhupada says in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, me give up, surrender? Why give up all this anxiety? Why would I do that? Well, if you can't, and it's reasonable that someone might not be able to do that all at once, then the recommendation throughout the scripture is start to be a giver where you are. Be a giver and see how it feels. So, for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter, Krishna says, you should just completely surrender to me and always think of me and just do devotional service 24 hours a day. How's that? Okay? Everyone? All right. Well, then he says, well, if you can't do that, if that doesn't work out for you right away, then he says, if you can't fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. Then he said, if you can't do that, practice, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you'll come to the perfect stage. And working for Krishna, Prabhupada describes, is a process of doing whatever work you're doing and then giving up some of the results of it, or giving up all the results, or at least some of them, to help spread Krishna consciousness. But then he says, if you can't do that for some reason, you might have social restraints, or you may not want to give everything to Krishna. Then he says, if however, you're unable to work in this consciousness of me, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated. And Prabhupada mentions in his purport that it may be that one is unable to even sympathize with the activities of Krishna consciousness because of social, familial, or religious considerations, or because of some other impediments. If one attaches himself directly to the activities of Krishna consciousness, there may be objections from family members or so many other difficulties. For one who has such a problem, it is advised that he sacrifice the accumulated result of his activities to some good cause. To what? SGC, some good cause. Such procedures are described in the Vedic rituals. There are many descriptions of sacrifices and specific functions of punya, or special work in which the result of one's previous actions may be applied. So there are gradations of giving. You can give your full consciousness to Krishna. And those who do so don't lack for anything. They experience the highest happiness that's possible. But because of conditioning, I may not be able to do that, so Krishna says there's a way you can practice thinking of me, which means what's called sadhana bhakti, or the practice of bhakti, through which you follow what the great teachers of bhakti, the great authorities of bhakti, bhakti means devotional service, have prescribed. For instance, in a day, there may be certain activities that you can do, along with all the other things that you're already doing, that will connect you to Krishna and help you think of Krishna. What are some of those things that you might do in the practice of bhakti to remember and think of Krishna? Chanting Hare Krishna? So chanting Hare Krishna means that you can take some time of your valuable time. And how would you do that chanting? Any suggestions from somebody who's engaged in the practice? What's that? Hear what you're chanting? Do you sit down? Yes? Sit down in a quiet place and chant Hare Krishna. What are some other practices you said? Worshipping Krishna's form. So you can have a picture of Krishna in your house, and even by seeing that picture, bring some water or some flower, as Krishna says, offer me a leaf of flower, fruit, or water. Anything else? Yes?
Yeah, I also sometimes just connect Krishna with, try to connect him with everything. For example, if I go to buy groceries and I enter the aisle where there's butter, so think that Krishna used to eat butter, he used to steal butter.
Used to steal butter? But you don't steal it, right?
I'm not Krishna.
So Krishna used to do that. So Krishna says in the Gita, Yat karoshi adashnashi aj johosi dadasiya yat tapasasi kontaya tat kurushva manarpanam. Everything that you do, all that you see, everything that you offer, give away, all the sacrifices you perform, connect it to me. And that way you'll remember me. These are all forms of giving. Giving of ourselves, because oftentimes, even in relationships, people don't give of themselves. And then the relationship withers. You know, families will sit down, the kids are looking at their cell phone, or Hare Krishna. And there's ways in which people can live together and not even give each other their attention. They don't give their heart, they don't give their minds, they just sort of go through automatically and not much consideration. How much time does it take to give somebody some attention? Approximately. Like practically in your family life, when you're living with somebody and you have a spouse maybe, and how much time does it take to give a little attention to your spouse? Mayapur's going to answer. How much time does it take to give a little attention to your spouse?
I mean, it's instant. I mean, no time. No.
Isn't there some count, right? How many seconds, minutes, hours, what? Can you say?
Within, I mean, just listen or, talk. So it's just within few seconds you can...
Few seconds, okay. Does it make any difference? Say you come home, you walk in, your spouse is in there, you just walk right by him or her. They wave, you don't wave, you go to your room. What'll happen then? Huh? What'll happen? Mahabharat. Kurukshetra. And what if you stop and you give 5 seconds of attention with full heart? What'll happen then? Prasadam. I mean, these are profound things. I mean, how long does it take to actually make a conscious connection with another living entity? Especially somebody you live with, you care about. How long does it take? If you make a conscious connection, also there are unconscious connections you can make it, or you can make a connection that is filled with some kind of sarcasm or half-heartedness. Living entities are psychic, aren't they? Especially spouses. Can't people tell whether you're sincere or not in the way you give your attention, the way you give yourself to another person? They can tell, right? Yeah, living entities are psychic. What to speak of Krishna? Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayantite. If you just give me a little bit of your attention, sincerely from your heart, I'll reciprocate. This is the exciting thing about life, about being a human being. You now have freedom to reciprocate with Krishna, the Supreme, who's in your heart at every moment. And to do that, to give yourself, then you grow. Then you actually realize something, that I'm non-material. I'm not dependent on this breathing, heaving body that I'm taking around with me everywhere. I'm dependent on Krishna. And when you grow by understanding that, you have more capacity to give. And the more you give, the more you feel this appreciation for the fact that I'm not the one supplying, Krishna is the one supplying. The theme of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Adi Leela, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts his Sankirtan movement, is about giving. It's about how he and the members of his group, his Sankirtan group, the first Sankirtan group, went out and they just started giving everywhere. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kept it to themselves for a year. He kept it locked up because he wanted the devotees to appreciate the esoteric nature of what they were about to give. And this is necessary also. You have to have something to give. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, they chanted Hare Krishna with complete attention. And Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, would not let anyone in that kirtan who was not completely sincere and devoted. Just so everyone could experience the intense happiness that comes from chanting the holy name. After a year, he opened the doors. He said, now go out and give it to as many people as possible. And it's not so easy to give sometimes because not everybody wants it, right? Have you ever experienced that? You want to give, but people don't want to take it? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates went out to give it. They were chanting Hare Krishna on the streets, and then someone called the cops. And they came there and said, no more chanting. And they broke the drums and they said, stop it, and so forth. But Kaviraj Goswami describes how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission was to give to everyone. And he deputized everyone and said, you give. Everyone, you become a giver. And the phenomena is that the more they gave, the more the contents, the more what they had increased. This is the lesson of giving. The more you give, the more it increases for you. And those things, someone might say, well, that's ridiculous because if I give away everything I have, what about my child's education and so forth? The point is that when we see that we can't control the kinds of things that we have in this world anyway, I try to hold on to them, but actually they're taken away from me by force because they're not really mine. I'm not really controlling them anyway. But if I make a systematic plan to give what I have, whatever I can give to Krishna, to the Sankirtan movement, to the devotees, then I start to see how I grow in knowledge and how Krishna takes care of what I have. And that whatever things I give away would have gone away anyway, but now there's a permanent credit involved. Once you give it away, then it's actually yours to keep forever, the things you gave away. But the things I try to keep forever, I lose anyway, and then I don't get the credit. So an intelligent person, or a person who has this realization that to give means to grow, becomes dedicated to this way of life, of seeing how much can I give to others, and lives in that. So in the seventh canto, 9th chapter of the Bhagavatam, we have whose prayers? Prahlad Maharaj. How old was he? 5 years old. but he was the most extraordinary devotee. He completely took shelter of Krishna, and Krishna protected him. In fact, he personally came to protect Prahlad Maharaj in the form of Nrsimhadev, half man, half lion incarnation. And for someone who's fully dependent on Krishna, Krishna makes special arrangements. Another, Madhavendra Puri. He never asked anybody for anything. He'd simply go wherever he could to perform his worship of Krishna, and he never asked anybody for food or shelter or anything. And when he came to Vrindavan, this place is there at Govinda Kund. It's right down the road from the Bhaktivedanta ashram. You can walk down there and sit at Govinda Kund, right where Madhavendra Puri sat. And he was sitting there chanting. And a little boy came up to him and he brought him a pot of milk and said, nobody fasts in my town. And Madhavendra Puri thought, that's extraordinary. I didn't tell anybody I was fasting. And he said, nobody fasts in my town. You take this. This was sent to you. And then the little boy disappeared. And Madhavendra Puri drank the milk, and then he dozed just a little bit, and then he had a dream. He saw that same little boy, but he was in the form of a deity, and he was in the bushes, and he was calling out to Madhavendra Puri, saying, I was left here by the Brajari when there was an attack by the foreigners, and they left me here in the bushes. You come rescue me. And then he came out to all the village residents, and he said, there's a deity deep within those bushes. And because conviction was so strong, they all picked up machetes. They went, cut through the brush, and they dug up, and there he was, the deity. And the Madhavendra Puri, because he was fully dependent on Krishna, Krishna says, when somebody's fully dependent on me, I take care of him completely. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana pariyupasite. Tesham nityabdhyuktanam yoga kshemam bahamyaham. What does Krishna say? Ananyas chintayanto mam. If you just give all your attention to me and my service, give everything to me. Ananyas chintayanto mam. And you just worship me. Then he says, yoga kshemam bahamyaham. I will personally deliver to you whatever you lack, and I'll preserve whatever you have. There's no lack whatsoever. Yoga kshemam bahamyaham. So to those who depend on Krishna, Krishna sends everything necessary. And as far as giving goes, Prahlad Maharaj gives this very easy to understand example in verse number 11, where he says, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is always fully satisfied in himself. Therefore, when something is offered to him, the offering by the Lord's mercy is for the benefit of the devotee. For the Lord does not need service from anyone. To give an example, if one's face is decorated, the reflection of one's face in a mirror is also seen to be decorated. You know, when we go on book distribution and we offer somebody a book and then we ask them at the end for donation, I tell them that it's not for me, I don't need the money, which is true. I say, when you give, you'll get the benefit for giving. And people understand that. They appreciate it. It's a universal principle. I say, I don't need the money, but if you give something in return, then actually you'll be elevated spiritually. It'll connect you to the previous teachers who have passed this down, and you'll be able to enter deeply within the book. And this verse is saying the same thing, that Krishna doesn't need anything. He's Purna, he's complete. But if you give something to Krishna, then you get benefit. And the example in this verse that Prahlad Maharaj gives is that if you see a reflection in the mirror and you decorate your face, then the reflection is also decorated. So in a similar way, we're images of Krishna, we're reflections of Krishna's. And when we give to Krishna, then we also become glorified, we also become decorated, we become satisfied. In the Krishna book, I'll read you 2 verses which are from the 10th canto, 11th chapter, 11th verse, which describe a pastime when Krishna was just a child. And at that time, people used to come by the house to bring vegetables and fruits and all kinds of other items that could be bartered. You didn't have to go to Costco or worse than that. I don't know, it could be worse than that. I remember when I was a kid, the milkman used to come right to our house. Anybody? Anybody else? You had that? Oh, that might have brought the cow sometimes too. And I remember when I lived in Bangalore, the cow used to come around, the man with a cow, and they'd milk the cow right there. But in the old days, the milkman used to come right to our garage, put the milk in and stuff. There was a little more interaction back then. We've taken the interaction out of life. You have to go down to one of the box stores, and you can't just buy one, you got to buy 10. And it's all in these plastic things you can't open unless you take a jackhammer to open it up. And the interactions between people are not so familial. They're corporate. Anyway, that's a side point. But in the village life, vendors used to come around and they would barter. They would bring all kinds of necessities, milk, fruit, flowers, and the residents would come out of their house and they would offer something in return. They would trade in this barter system. So in the village where Krishna lived, there was a woman who would come by to bring fruits and flowers, which is described in this verse. Pala vikrayini tasya, pala vikrayani tasya, chuta dhanya kara dvayam. Palir apurayad ratnai, pala bandam apuricha. Actually, I'll read verse 10 first. Once a woman selling fruit was calling, "O inhabitants of Rajabhumi, if you want to purchase some fruits, come here." Upon hearing this, Krishna immediately took some grains and went to barter as if he needed some fruits. Purport: Aborigines generally go to the villages to sell fruits. How much the Aborigines were attached to Krishna is here described. Krishna, to show his favor to the Aborigines, would immediately go purchase fruits, bartering with paddy in his hand as he had seen others do. Text 11, while Krishna was going to the fruit vendor very hastily, most of the grains he was holding fell. Nonetheless, the fruit vendor filled Krishna's hands with fruits, and her fruit basket was immediately filled with jewels and gold. Purport: in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati taram bhaktuparitam ashnami pariyatatmanaha. Krishna is so kind that if anyone offers him a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or some water, he will immediately accept it. The only condition is that these things should be offered with bhakti. Yo me bhaktya prayachati. That means devotion and love. Otherwise, if one is puffed up with false prestige, thinking, I have so much opulence, I am giving something to Krishna, one's offering will not be accepted by Krishna. The fruit vendor, although a woman belonging to the poor Aborigine class, dealt with Krishna with great affection, saying, Krishna, you have come to me to take some fruit in exchange for grains. All the grains have fallen, but still you may take whatever you like. Thus she filled Krishna's palms with whatever fruits he could carry. In exchange, Krishna filled her whole basket with jewels and gold. From this incident, one should learn that for anything offered to Krishna with love and affection, Krishna can reciprocate many millions of times over, both materially and spiritually. The basic principle involved is an exchange of love. Therefore, Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita 9:27, Yat karoshi yadashnasi, yat johoshi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya, tat kurushva mad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me. With love and affection, one should try to give something to Krishna from one's source of income. Then one's life will be successful. Krishna is full of all opulences. He does not need anything from anyone. But if one is prepared to give something to Krishna, that is for one's own benefit. The example given in this connection is that when one's real face is decorated, the reflection of one's face is automatically decorated. Similarly, if we try to serve Krishna with all our opulences, we as parts and parcels or reflections of Krishna will become happy in exchange. Krishna is always happy, for he is Atma Rama, fully satisfied with his own opulence. I rest my case. And now we'll hear from the jury, or if there are any opposing counsel. Yes. Govinda Datto Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for a nice talk. You said like Ananyas Chintyato Mam, Ye Jana Priyapasate. Then Krishna take full responsibility of such a person. At the same time, we hear that God help those who help themselves. So how do we reconcile these two aspects? And there's a pastime of Mother Yashoda binding, and there are two fingers. So one of the finger denotes like the one's own endeavor to receive the mercy of the Lord.
Well, Prabhupada once said, God helps those who help themselves means, helping oneself means putting oneself in front of transcendental sound vibration. And as far as the two fingers, there's 2 inches. When Mother Yashoda tried to tie Krishna with rope out of love, because he was getting wild, as kids do, breaking things, running around. She was afraid. Vrindavan's looking over here. You're all right. You used to be like that. Now you're over there studying calculus or something. Or Sanskrit. He's noting. Wow. Thank you. He's noting down. Because of yesterday's class? About capturing everything? This 2 inches, it's a nice point you're making. Mother Yashoda was chasing after Krishna, and we know from the pastime, very charming pastime, that when she caught up to baby Krishna, she tried to bind him with rope, and then the neighborhood women came and everyone noticed that every time she tied him, the rope was 2 inches short. So she got more rope, and then the village women were enjoying the whole scene. They were laughing, and they was, here, try this, try that. They were giving more and more rope. There were hundreds and hundreds of yards of rope, and every time they'd add more, it's still 2 inches too short. Krishna's mystic power. Who can actually bind Krishna? He's everything. He's the whole universe. But he's embodied in the form of child, his original form, Adipurusha. Inconceivable form he has. And then finally, when he noticed that Yashoda was laboring very hard, he allowed himself to be tied. He is completely independent, but out of love, he agrees to be controlled by his devotee, to be tied up. Nobody can tie him. So one of our acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, mentions that these 2 inches are significant because 1 inch means that we must make our own endeavor. And the second means, the second inch, is that then Krishna meets us halfway when he sees that we're sincere and we're trying. And more to the point, there's a verse from Prahlad Maharaj in the same chapter I mentioned, from his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. He was just a boy, and he made these beautiful prayers, and in one of them he says that parents can't save their children. A doctor with his medicine cannot save a sick patient. Kanka, you're a nurse for how many years? 20 years? Is that true? That's true. It's true, okay. I once asked Satyadev, who was a a paramedic, how many people did you save? He said, I never saved anybody. He said, so many people were meant to die and they lived, and so many people were meant to live and they died. He said, I only prolonged a few people's suffering. Of course, that's Satyadeva's dry wit. But in any case, it says that parents can't save their children. This sounds shocking. A doctor can't save a patient, and a boat on water can't save a drowning man. Hare Krishna. So, if you go to the doctor, you can ask next time and verify this first. Next time you go to the doctor, you say, can you guarantee that you're going to save me? And the doctor will say, please sign this form that says if I kill you, that I'm indemnified. You won't be able to sue me. That's what they'll say. But they may not say that, but they will say, I cannot guarantee you anything. Nothing. I can't guarantee you anything. And sometimes, if the doctor says, oh, don't worry. Recently, an actress, famous actress, comedian, Joan Rivers, died in the middle of an operation. And just before she went in the operation, she was very worried. And the doctor said, don't worry, you're not going to die on my shift. And then she died. Doctors out there never say that. Because you don't know. You can't guarantee. Nobody can guarantee anything like that. So Prahlad Maharaj says that these are all dependent on the mercy of God, that if you can save a person who's drowning, that now that sounds shocking, because everyone might say, well, what about my kids? What about the medical profession? What about saving someone who's in a dangerous situation? Prabhupada explains, you do your best. Do the best you can. You have a duty to do the best you can. But you must also, at the same time, understand that it's not up to you, finally, what happens. It's up to Krishna. Because unless he gives his sanction and everything comes together, there's 5 factors of action mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Unless those are all lined up, then you're not going to get what you tried for. So you may try to help yourself, but ultimately the best way to help yourself is to organize your lives so that you can be conscious of God. And as far as the material aspect of life, do your best, but don't go overboard. That's called over-endeavor. Trying too hard to maintain something that you can't maintain anyway. Do the best you can. And ultimately, Krishna is talking in the Gita about the kind of mentality you should have, yadrisha labhasantushto. If you depend on gain that comes of its own accord, without becoming overly heated in the pursuit of getting everything you want, or that you think you need, and you depend more on Krishna as you go through and do your regular duties in life and do the best you can, you should depend on Krishna. It's a balance. Thank you for listening to that answer. You knew what I was going to say, and you brought it out for the benefit of the audience. I appreciate it. Yes?
I just wanted to add a comment about the permanent credit you mentioned, Prabhuji.
Yes.
So I think that permanent credit is also good for the next birth, so it's permanent forever.
Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Neha bikramanashosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even if you do a tiny little bit of giving for the right cause, for Krishna, then that's permanent. And it'll save you from the most dangerous type of fear, not just this life, the next life, forever. It goes on your record for good. Spiritual giving to Krishna. You had a question? Yes.
Namaste. This is
Namaste.
something in relation... Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, this is something in relation to the answer you've given. For example, we depend on Krishna, that is true, but there are many times when whatever we expect that might not come, as we expect. We might expect something good, but, the opposite happens. So how do we explain that? And because specifically when you said like Krishna, we have to depend on Krishna. So I see people who don't have faith in Krishna, they get all the things, the same things that I get. So then what is the point in worshipping? And secondly, you have given this...
Wait, do one thing at a time, because I can't hold a lot of concepts and still answer them.
No.
But let's talk about the first thing, that there may be a way in which I depend on Krishna and then I don't get what I want. So it's important to think about whether I know what I need or whether Krishna knows what I need better. Who knows better, Krishna or me? Let's establish that first. What do you think? Do I know better or does Krishna know better? Just that one question.
Well, I can say that Krishna knows better.
Does Krishna know better or I know better?
I'm not sure, because I can just say because...
All right, let me say that Krishna is omniscient. He's all-powerful. This is the definition. He's all-powerful and he's all-merciful. He knows everything and he knows everyone all at the same time, and he's compassionate. He's known as the ocean of mercy. So do I know everything? No, just me. Do I know everything?
No.
No. Thank you for establishing that. And do I know everyone?
No.
No. And I therefore, what Krishna does and what I do and what he knows and what I know are on two different levels, just by definition. This is the premise, that Krishna knows everything and that he's all merciful. God knows what I need. My point is very practical, and that is that I may get different results from my prayers and my expectations when I'm performing my service, but I can't see the ultimate goal that Krishna has for me and why he's bringing certain things. And there may be a way in which, when you go to a doctor, say you sit outside with your clipboard and you do a sociological study about the nature of doctors. So it's a pediatric doctor, so one mother brings the child in, and the doctor says, tell him to go on a very strict diet. He can only eat fruit for the next 2 days. And another one comes in and says he has to fast. Another one says, you tell him to eat lots of food with ghee. And then you'll say, why is that doctor discriminating? He told one boy to fast, that's very cruel. And he told the other boy that you can eat a big feast with ghee, and the other one he told only eat fruit. So the doctor is making these discriminations, but who knows better, me or the doctor? I'm not in medical school, I don't know about the disease and so forth. Who knows better, me or the doctor? The answer is? The doctor. So the point is that Krishna knows what we need, and when we make a sincere prayer to Krishna, he may give us what we need, so be careful. If you don't want actually to get free from all suffering and to be established in eternal happiness, then there's a way in which you can pray for, just arrange everything in the material world in the right way. But Krishna actually described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he's more intelligent than we are, more intelligent than I am. Because he knows what my ultimate good is. And when I approach Krishna and I say, I surrender, but I want to keep this, this, and this, and this. Krishna just hears the part, I want to surrender, and he says, but he should, all these other things, for him to actually be happy, I need to take them away. So this was noticed by Narada Muni. In the Mahabharata, it's mentioned that he talks to the Pandavas. He says, it's really interesting, who's more intimate with Krishna than you? And he's ruined your life. Look at your life, is horrible. You lost your kingdom. You lost your wife in a gambling match. I mean, what could be worse? This is really interesting. And the verse comes, Yasyahamana Grinnami Harishe Tadhanam Shanai. Then when Krishna shows his ultimate mercy to somebody, he actually takes away everything, because then they actually have a moment of clarity. And you don't get many of these. If someone gets one moment of clarity in their whole life, life goes by very quickly. Most people don't live past 82. And the last 10 years are usually, they're befuddled. They can't walk, and they can't see, and they can't hear and stuff. And in the beginning of their life, they're just babbling children running around aimlessly. As young adults, they're only blinded by the opposite sex. And then right after that, they get married, and they got to work hard and answer to their boss. So everyone goes through life until they hit old age without actually ever getting even one moment of clarity. So when Krishna comes along for a sincere soul and takes away everything, and then all of a sudden they take a closer look at their life, this is a great gift to the living entity. So when he shows his kindness, he actually arranges life in such a way that we can have that moment of clarity. I had a realization of this for myself one day when I was gardening in my backyard. During the summer, and the windows were open. We have no screens on our house. And a little bird flew in the house. I saw him go right in the kitchen window. So I thought, he's not going to become very happy living in the house, so I'm going to go rescue him. And I went in the kitchen, and I opened up the double-pane windows, which made some noise, and he looked at me with great fear in his eye, and he flew into the next room, which is the temple room. So I went in there, and I opened up all the windows. And he said, "You're chasing me." And I went to the next room, opened the windows, "Please go out, go free, little bird." And he raced around the whole house till we got all the way back to the kitchen, and he noticed the open window, and he flew out with terror in his eyes, thinking that I was trying to kill him. And then I realized afterwards that I was just like that little bird. Krishna is opening all these windows for me, trying to take me out of material suffering, but I think he's trying to kill me by taking away those attachments which are actually giving me the greatest suffering in this world. So faith means understanding that if I depend on Krishna, he knows what to do. And he can very properly adjust my life in such a way that I can attain my highest good. And someone may say, well, I don't have that faith yet. So then Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, try a little bit. He said, you don't even have to give to me. If you don't believe in me, you don't believe there is a supreme personality of Godhead to give to somebody. Because as soon as you start giving, you start growing. Your realization grows. As soon as you let go of something you think is yours and you say, I'll give it for a higher cause, whatever that cause is, simultaneously there's a growth in heart. Your heart becomes bigger, more capable of giving, and you think, and in that pinch, when you just let go of that thing, it's like, I need this or I'll die. Unless I hoard this last piece of gold, I'll die. But you let it go for a higher cause. Then all of a sudden, you become a hero that lasts forever. You're always known as the person who gave that up. And then in your own heart and mind, you also grow in capacity, and you feel yourself to be something. Knowledge comes in, and you go, I didn't die. And actually, I'm still breathing, and still things are coming to me. So there's a practice, there's a way that one can begin this practice, and therefore it's recommended that wherever you can start giving, do that. And the highest way of giving is giving your life, attention, wealth, everything to Krishna, and then you become, paradoxically, the richest person, the safest person. It's the safest condition. You become the most wealthy and so forth. And Krishna's saying, you don't have to believe me. If you're not on that level, just try it on some level and to test it out. It's like people go to a lake and it's a little cold, the air is cold, so they put their little toe in the water, go! And then they put the 2 more toes in, and then maybe they dangle their foot in the water. And that's the slow way to do it. Some people just go in and they go, I'm jumping in, and they jump in. And they say, hey, the water's fine. And they start splashing everybody else. And they say, what are you waiting for? So you can go the slow way, or you can go the fast way. And that's why Krishna is giving all this information in the Gita. He just ultimately says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja ahang tvang sarva papebhyo mokshayishami masuchaha. Just surrender unto me, I'll deliver you. Don't worry about anything. Masuchaha means don't worry about a thing. Got nothing to worry about if you just surrender to me. And if you ask anybody who's completely surrendered to Krishna, Is it a horrible life? Are you unhappy? They'll say, no, I'm the happiest person alive. And if you ask somebody who's working very hard to keep everything that they have and protect it in every way, how are you doing? How's everybody doing in the world these days, by the way? Are they extremely happy and blissful at all times, in all places, in all circumstances, by trying to get as much as possible? I'm not saying everyone's trying to get as much. There are many givers out there, and there are many people who are, dedicating themselves to God. But in a general way, people are in anxiety because they're trying to take as much as possible, more than they need. And that's a formula for misery and anxiety. Formula for success is give. Be a giver. And the best is to give to Krishna because, like the stomach, when you give food to the stomach, it gives it back to everybody. As soon as you give a nice orange to your stomach, you just say, I'm not going to keep it. The hands can't keep it. The eyes can't enjoy it. The stomach's only one who knows what to do with it. So we'll give it to him, and you give it to him. He just knows what to do with it. He starts sending out all those beautiful orange molecules, divides them all up, says, okay, the brain gets them first because he's keeping us going here. He tells us which way to routes all the glucose from the orange goes up to the brain to feed the cells in the brain, and then the vitamin C, I don't know what I'm talking about. It goes different places. But it does. And even though I don't know what I'm talking about, I know when I eat an orange that everything happens automatically. And similarly, those who engage in spiritual life and they start giving to Krishna, they know for themselves. They know it's coming back to me. I'm not losing anything, and I'm being protected, actually. And they feel safe. This is a paradox. And the more I try to hold on, and the more I try to protect, and the more I try to keep myself in the center of everything, the more I feel anxiety and suffering. So one can take a gentle, gradual approach and test this theory out. This is something that anybody can do from any position, and they'll see. It becomes natural. Even in self-help, it's said that if you're in great anxiety, if you've had a great loss in your life, the best thing that you can do is go out and volunteer and help somebody else. Go out and volunteer, help somebody else, and then all of a sudden your world becomes bigger. Your perspective becomes bigger, and you start seeing everybody in the world is in the same situation as I'm in. We're all swimming in the same ocean, and we're all being fed by the same supreme feeder, Krishna. And if you have that, you don't need anything else. You become supremely blissful, happy, satisfied, wherever you go. Okay?
I have a question. Like if a child expects something from his father, for example, and his father treats all the children in the same level, right? Then obviously the child would feel bad. I mean, after all, he's the father. He needs that special affection from his father. So because I'm still in the beginning stage, Maharaj, so I need some assurance from Krishna. Otherwise, I have people telling me to follow Jesus. I have some people, who tell me to follow Allah. So if I have to follow Krishna, I need that minimum assurance that yes, I'm on the right path. I can read Gita or I can read Puranas, whatever it is, but it should happen in my real life. Only then there can be, I can think, yes, it's good that the lady got all the gold in the world, whatever, but it did not happen to me. So I remember, it's not now, but 3 years back, I did give my 100% to Krishna. But I was let down. But it was not even a gross materialistic desire or something that I had. I did not want to become the king of the universe or something, but something very realistic. So it did not happen. And, I was told by an astrologer I was going through this Shani or whatever it is. But I felt let down because if Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he should have protected me. At the circumstance, I got into an accident when I was not supposed to. And even if you say that it's my karma, then if Krishna cannot protect me from karma, then why am I worshipping him? That is my question.
Well, first thing to understand, there is a God, and I'm not him. There is a God and I'm not him. Whether you call Allah or you say Jehovah or Krishna, these are all names for the same person. So it's not a matter of a religion or a sectarian idea, but it's a matter of the fact of understanding that I'm not the supreme controller. There is a supreme controller. And I don't know what is the exact right thing for me to do. Therefore, I put it in Krishna's hands. So Maharaj Prithu gave a prayer in which he says, Krishna, I'm not going to pray for anything specific. I'm not going to ask for a basket of gold. I'm going to ask for a new car, for a Mercedes-Benz. I'm going to ask that you do whatever you think is best for me. I'll leave it in your hands. Now, I may ask for something specific, and Krishna, out of his mercy, may delay that, or because it's not good for me. If a child asks for, who has cholera and says, give me a samosa, and the parent says, no samosa for you, someone may say, what's wrong with that parent? Well, the parent knows if the child eats the samosa, he will die, and therefore he withholds the samosa. This comes out in the story of Sudama Brahman. Sudama Brahman also went to see his friend Krishna, and then he came back and his life was changed. But it mentioned in that chapter that Krishna arranges for everybody what's best for them. What's really best for us is to develop love for Krishna. When we have that love, it doesn't matter. Devotees don't care what they have or where they live. Narayana paraksarvena kutaschana bhibyati swarga pavarga narakeshu api tulyana darshanaha. The Srimad Bhagavatam talks about the Narayana Parayana, those who are completely sold out to God. They have no other business but to love God. And therefore, whether they're in Swarga, in heaven, or they're in Naraka, hell, or anywhere else, in Market and Powell, which is a pretty good, has a lot of resemblance to the hellish planets. Hare Krishna. They don't care because they have service to do and they're feeling satisfied just by that. So we can start on the beginning level. There is a God, I'm not him. There is a supreme controller, I'm not the supreme controller. And there are forces, like you said, with Shani comes into your chart and everyone goes, whoa, Shani's coming. Shani basically comes and delivers the fruit of your karma. He has a nice plate, and he'll come up to you and you go, here's what you deserve. And you go, no, not me. Did I do that? But Krishna, it says in the Brahma Samhita, as twindra gopamata vendra mohosa karma, bandhanu rupa palabhajanamata noti, karmani nirdahati kintucha bhakti bhajam, govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. When you worship Krishna, he starts diminishing, taking away all your karma. He gives mercy. He doesn't give you justice. In the material world, you get justice, but we don't want that. Because if you get what you deserve, watch out. So many lifetimes, who knows? I don't know what I did. I can't even remember what I did when I was a kid, and I did a lot of bad stuff. I used to blow up mailboxes, just for fun. Only twice. That was a federal offense. I hope this is not being recorded. I think the statute of limitations is over. But I can't remember all the things I've done, so if I get the justice that I deserve, then I'm cooked. But Krishna, when you pray to Krishna and just say, do what's best for me, he may arrange so many different things for my purification. You can just depend on him. And we're not concerned the name of God. We say Allah. Allah means the greatest. Yes, he is the greatest. We may say Jehovah, or Yahweh, Govinda, Krishna. These are all names for the Supreme, but some of them are sweet because they refer to the personality of Godhead. They're not general phrases and so forth. So wherever you go, it doesn't matter which organization, which religious affiliation you have, what we're looking for are two qualities. One is unmotivated service. I'm not asking anything from God. I don't want anything returned. I just want to give my love. And the second is, it's uninterrupted. In other words, am I living in it all the time? Do I get to do it all the time, or is it interrupted and I only get to visit it every once in a while? These two things. And then it doesn't matter which particular association you have. If that quality's there, that's what you look for. That's the kind of association that the Bhagavatam says will give you complete satisfaction. If you give yourself with no motivation to God and say, I'm just going to give to you, and you don't expect anything in return, and it's uninterrupted, then you'll be completely satisfied. But I agree, in the beginning it can be a little bit confusing. And as you go along, even our founder Acharya, in his life, he gives us an example. When he was living in India as a householder, then he met his spiritual master when he was very young. His spiritual master says, you give up everything, you help me spread this movement. It took him decades before he could actually answer that. And he went through life. And there's a lot of twists and turns. And sometimes you don't know how Krishna is working in your life. And he said the same thing. So he said he was the head of one of the largest, and even people now that we've interviewed in India said he was set up to be one of the richest people in India. His chart, his astrological chart said, yes, he will be richer than Birla, the astrologer said. And he knew all the right people, he was set up, he had all the intelligence and connections, everything to make as much money as Birla. And then his plan was he was going to use that to serve Krishna. He would spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. And then what happened? Krishna took everything away. He said, Krishna forced me to come to America as a penniless beggar. But he never said, Krishna, why did you do this to me? He just accepted it. He said, this is what I've got, and I have to go on with whatever I have. And later, when his worldwide movement was revealed, he said, now I understand. I couldn't see exactly at the time how Krishna was using me. And on the boat, the Jaladuta, coming to America, he wrote in his prayer, Krishna, I don't know what you have in mind for me. And he signs it, the most insignificant beggar. And that's how he felt, completely humble and just dependent on Krishna. Then he noted, I left a small band of family members who are now just a list of names because most of them have all died and gone away in different places. But now I have hundreds of children who care more for me than my other biological children ever cared for. He noted many times that although he came to America penniless, now he was a crorepati, many times over in every currency of the world. And he didn't do anything, he didn't even want any of it. He just was. Krishna used him as an instrument to make the philosophy of Krishna consciousness available to people all over the world. So our business in Krishna consciousness is to become convinced and aware of the fact that by giving, we actually grow. And you can start from wherever you are now and practice and give it a little time. Just because one time something didn't go the way you wanted, maybe that's Krishna's plan. It's Krishna's plan for you. The most frustrated, if you become completely frustrated and you say, I give up, maybe that's the best thing that could possibly happen to you. Like Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, before the war started, he said, I've been doing everything right, and look, now everything's going wrong. He said, Nimitani, Viparitani. He said, although I did everything right, Viparitani, now everything's wrong. And he dropped his bow, he said, I don't get it. I give up. He was crying. And in that moment, he received the highest spiritual knowledge. So don't worry if you become frustrated. Actually, that's a moment of clarity. Kanka. This is Kanka Devi Dasi, one of the founders,
I just wanted
early
to say
pioneers of
that
Krishna
in the
consciousness.
beginning of Krishna consciousness, well, two things. When Srila Prabhupada took sannyas, he was also gored by a bull as he was walking down, and he was horrified at the thought, but his Guru Maharaj kept coming to him in a dream saying, you should take sannyas. And he was horrified at the thought of actually making that commitment. And then after he did make the commitment, he was actually gored by a bull and thrown up in the air in Vrindavan. And so that's an example of, we don't know why or what Krishna's plan is. And then also the process of Krishna consciousness is a process, and it takes time. And just like when we boil ghee, how the impurities come to the top. So similarly, if we can just practice every day, sometimes we're going to be in the most anxiety that we've ever felt, but those are the impurities leaving. And as they leave, then slowly, the heart becomes clean by practicing the process of bhakti. And there's another example, like when you clean a house, you might pull your couch out, and oh my gosh, you got so much dust underneath. You start cleaning, and in the middle you go, oh my gosh, it's dirtier than it was when I started. But actually it's not. You are cleaning every corner, and then it will get clean. And that's the process of bhakti. It's so simple for the simple and difficult for the crooked. So you got to just take it day by day, little by little, and the process works.
Hare Krishna. Yes? Okay. So now we'll have an opportunity to do something that comes naturally to most people, which is just sing and dance. If you don't feel like dancing, you can sway back and forth to the music. And we'll stand before the deity, dim the lights a little bit, and then we can sing the Hare Krishna mantra. The recommendation is to just hear the mantra. The mantra is divine. It comes from the spiritual world. It's the same as Krishna. The sound vibration is Krishna himself. And if you simply take shelter of the sound, let the sound go in, and to worship the divine sound as Krishna, then naturally you'll develop all the good qualities, spiritual qualities. You'll get good intelligence, and you'll purify the heart so that you can love Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpataruvascha kripasannabhe evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.